Hi, and welcome to this video lesson which focuses on how to answer the question on the AQA examination, and we're looking at the character of Mr. Birling and how Priestley presents him throughout the play. Okay, brief reminder as to the assessment objectives. As with the other sections on AQA, it's a 30 marker, and the 30 marks are divided into AO1, 12 marks, AO2, 12 marks, AO3 context, 6 marks, plus 4 marks for SPAG in this. So have a little read through what's required there. I mean, you should know these by now, but we'll cover all these as we progress through this video. So what does a question look like? Remember, this is the only section on the AQA exam where you have a choice. You can answer either a character question or a theme question on Inspector Calls. Do not answer both, it's either or. And don't decide beforehand whether you're definitely going to answer the character question or definitely going to answer the theme question. Keep an open mind, see what the questions are that turn up. Remember, a theme question you can incorporate, multiple characters into as well. And a character question, you can talk about other characters, but in terms of how they impact upon the main character in your question. Here's another 2 examples. And remember, either or, you don't answer both. Character question or a theme question. So for the benefit of this video, I'm going to answer question 1. How does Priestley present Mr. Birling in An Inspector Calls? So you kind of highlight or underline the key focus of the question, which in this case is Mr. Birling, and ensure then that every single thing you write focuses on his character and how he comes across. Okay, so the question, how does Priestley present Mr. Birling in An Inspector Calls? Write about how he's presented and how he reacts to other characters in the play. How Priestley presents Mr. Birling throughout the play. Okay, so keep this character at the centre of each point you make, but you can incorporate his interaction with others. For example, how he treats Eric and how this compares to how he treats Gerald. Which one of Gerald or Eric would he really rather as a son? They're ostensibly celebrating the engagement of his daughter with Gerald. Is he happy for his daughter? Or is he thinking of how this arrangement could work for his business? And what does that say about his character? What are his attitudes to his workers? How does he feel when he learns of what happens to Eva Smith? So, his interaction with other characters are important because they tell us a lot about who he is and what his belief system is. The how part of the question will be looking for you to explore the ways in which Priestley presents his character, focusing on techniques and dramatic devices in your answer. And I'll have a look at some of those in a minute. There are also a couple of other videos that focus exclusively on the dramatic devices and stage directions in An Inspector Calls. So do jump over to them and have a look at those also. Yeah, right, okay. How to structure your answers is important. Every examiner's report I've ever read says that students who show evidence of planning routinely secure higher marks. So 45 minutes you have for this question in the exam. Make sure you spend 5 to 10 minutes doing a plan. Aim to write for 30 minutes, and you're talking about 3 or 4 detailed paragraphs where you explore his character, making several points, incorporating other characters into your answer. Now, so part of the planning process, ask yourself some basic questions about the character. How is Mr. Birling described in the opening stage directions? Go on then, there's a test. Tell me now. What was that? Okay. Yes, well done, you got it right. Heavy looking, portentous, speaks with the provincial accent. So what can we infer from how he's presented there? Heavy looking, likes the good life, bit overweight, indulges a little bit too much. Portentous, so he likes the sound of his own voice. He's a prosperous manufacturer. We learn that in the opening stage direction, so we know he's successful. He's a successful businessman. Provincial in his speech, suggests that he's not born into money. He's not born into the higher classes. He's had to work his way up. So, there's some positives and some negatives there. What ideology does he represent? And what I mean by ideology, what is his belief system? So you need to think about Priestley here. Priestley's a socialist. So Priestley uses the character of Birling. So you could say that Birling is a dramatic construct, a device that Priestley uses to further his own views. So Birling represents capitalism, and Priestley wants us to think poorly of capitalism because we think poorly of Birling. So how does Priestley want the audience to respond to him? Well, we're not supposed to like him because he's an idiot. He's unpleasant. He's very cold and calculating. He looks after his own interests rather than even the interests of his family, but certainly not the interests of his workers or the wider community. He's very focused on status and reputation. We know he's married his social superior in Mrs. Birling. Why has he done this? Why is he happy for his daughter to be marrying Gerald, the son of Sir and Lady Croft? Has he learned anything? Will his response to the second inspector be any different? So if you look at the evolution of each character in the play from start to end, well, we can look at Sheila and see that she's undergone a great transformation. Eric to a lesser extent. Arthur Birling, is he any different at the end to the beginning? Well, certainly not as big a change. Is he going to respond to the second inspector in the same way as the first? Well, we don't know for sure, but we can maybe hazard a guess that not a lot has changed. Okay, so some dramatic devices for you to focus on. Stage directions, please check my other video, cleverly entitled Stage Directions, for a far more detailed look at his use of stage directions. Lighting, look at the opening stage directions, pink and intimate, to brighter, harder, and the interpretations of each, and then link it to the question. See the world through rose-tinted glasses could be the pink and intimate. In other words, we don't see the world as it truly is, or we don't see the family as they truly are. We don't see Arthur Birling at the beginning as he truly is. But as soon as the inspector arrives, the lighting becomes brighter and harder, and the colour white could symbolise truth or the interrogation, the spotlight of the interrogation, but our journey as an audience member towards truth. So we get to see the family as they truly are. Timings, look at the precise moment the inspector arrives. It interrupts Birling whilst in full flow, telling the younger generation one should look after their own business. Now that's not by accident, because that sets them against each other. Not just them as characters, but their different ideologies. Birling's capitalism versus Priestley's socialism. And who comes out on top? The inspector himself is a literary device representing the views of Priestley. That's another technique, and you could say that Birling is a dramatic device as well, as a character representing not a real character, not a real person, but a representative, symbolic of capitalist views. Symbolism: who or what does each character represent? Eva representing the poor, Birling capitalism, and so on. Sound: there's not a lot of sound, but the ring of the doorbell and the phone at the end, both sharply and both signalling the arrival of an inspector. So reference to a time play. Okay, so there's a few dramatic devices for you. Remember, you're looking at 3 or 4 detailed points. So here's but also you preface those points with a brief introduction. The examiner's training I've been doing suggests that a little introduction, 1 or 2 sentences, setting out your main ideas behind the answer, or just summing up your perception of the point of the question in your introduction, is a very good useful skill to do. So a sample introduction here. Mr. Birling represents the capitalist attitudes that Priestley is so keen to devalue. Well, that's kind of a basic point. Although established in the opening stage directions as a prosperous manufacturer, it soon becomes apparent that it is Priestley's wish for the audience to dislike this hard-headed practical man of business. There are certain quotations you'll see me use that you can incorporate into multiple questions. So, hard-headed practical man of business could be on a theme of a question on capitalism, a question on community, but also a question on Birling himself. First point: Mr. Birling lacks subtlety. He represents the capitalist attitudes that Priestley is so keen to devalue. Some quotations: lower costs and higher prices. This represents his desire to see the union of the Birlings and the Crofts. Hard-headed practical man of business. This is kind of referenced 3 times in close succession in the play itself. Delighted with the engagement of his daughter to Gerald Croft. Not necessarily to see her happy, but as it represents an excellent business opportunity for him. Remember, each paragraph should contain, Peter, that's point, evidence, technique, explanation, audience impact, and then a couple of points referencing context. Okay, but not necessarily in that order. Okay, so let's beef up this opening point. Lacking subtlety, in the same opening stage directions, he's also described as portentous, and his boast about how the Titanic is absolutely unsinkable and his insistence that the Germans don't want war highlight just how foolish and ill-informed he is. Writing the play so soon after the end of World War II, while setting it in 1912, allowed Priestley to use dramatic irony to present Birling's views as flawed and outdated. He believed society in 1946 England was ready to embrace change. And this is referenced actually or reinforced by the fact that although it was a Conservative government that won the war for us under Churchill, within the end of that year, Labour had won a landslide general election. So it kind of implied that there was an appetite for change, and Priestley really wanted to take advantage of this. Priestley was determined to encourage this change to a more socialist society, and by using a character like Birling, it allowed him to further this agenda. Almost a figure of ridicule, it is equally unpalatable when we realise that his delight at the impending marriage of his daughter to Gerald Croft has less to do with her happiness, but more to do with the business opportunity it provides, to ensure lower costs and higher prices are maintained, with the potential future merging of Birling and Company to the larger Crofts Limited. Okay, so I'm in the black there. You don't need to do this in the exam, but I've just identified the various elements of that P2C, the elements the examiner is looking for to ensure that you secure top marks. Okay, so if you've got access to the PDF here, you can print it out and you can make notes. So what other points could you make? Well, point, he accepts no responsibility for his role in the death of Eva Smith, and given the time again, we suspect he would act in exactly the same way. His responsibility is not to his workers, but simply to keep labour costs down, believing he was quite justified in telling her to clear out. He believes his only responsibility is to himself and his family, referring to the idea of community as pure nonsense. Okay, you can read the development and the context bit yourself. Two further points you could make. His primary concern is his reputation and status within society, and there's some evidence to support that. Fourth point you could make, he's a poor father, doesn't really understand his son or his daughter, and sees his daughter as a pathway to even greater wealth and status through her marriage to Gerald, less concerned about his happiness. Okay, so there are further points that you can make. Okay, so that covers that question. A reminder, if your membership package allows, you can submit a full answer to this question, or indeed any question. And I'll mark it and provide detailed feedback as to how you can improve to secure the top grades. Okay, best of luck and see you back again. Bye now.